خير الخلق قدوتنا تعال وزر وشاركنا وقم بالخير سابقنا لقانا في ابن تيمية وخير الخلق قدوتنا لقانا في ابن تيمية وخير الخلق قدوتنا لقانا في ابن تيمية وخير الخلق قدوتنا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله المحمود على كل حال، ونعوذ بالله من حال أهل الضلال، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الكبير المتعال، وأشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم المآل. Amma ba'd. Last week we took the proofs on wiping over the khuff, and we took that they were mentioned in aqidah statements or books because at a point of time it was a trademark for some of the people of bid'ah, and we stated that wiping on the khuff is only in minor impurity, not major impurity. Then we took al-jabira, which are casts or bandages, medical bandages, and we stated that you can wipe over them in both the state of minor and major impurity. And we took the Masā'il pertaining to that. Then we took the limit on wiping over the khuff. The duration of 72 hours for travelers and 24 hours for a resident. We stopped off at the author's statement, من الحدث إلى مثله. من الحدث إلى مثله. This statement pertains to the issue of when does the clock start ticking on wiping over the khuff. When does the limit of the 72 hours for a traveler and a day and a night, 24 hours for a resident begin? When does it end? من الحدث إلى مثله. From the author's statement is literally translated as from the timing of breaking one's wudū to its like. And that needs to be explained. When does the clock start ticking? According to the author, he says, min al-hadathi. Let's take this scenario. Fajr is at 6:30. You got up 6:30, made wudū at 6:30, and you washed your feet, you put your socks or your khuff on. 8 a.m. you fell asleep or you broke your wudū through the various means one can break their wudū. And then at 1 p.m. you got up to make salat al-dhuhr and you made wudū and wiped over your socks or your khuff. Does the clock start ticking for the 24 or 72 hour limit at Fajr 6:30 when you made wudū, washed your feet and put them on? Or does it start when you broke your wudū at 8 a.m. by deeply sleeping? Or does it start the first time you wiped on them at 1 p.m. when you made your first wudū and wiped over them? Keep that scenario in mind because those three choices, those three timings, 6:30 a.m. and 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. are actually the three opinions in this matter. The opinions are, first of all, the opinion of the majority of the ulama, the Jumhur, Shafi'i, Abu Hanifa, and the madhab of the Hanabila. They said the timing begins from when the wudū first invalidates, after you wear them. This is the opinion of the author because he said, min al-hadathi. In the scenario we took, the person made wudū at 6:30 a.m. and put the socks on, but he invalidated the wudū by sleeping at 8 a.m. Or let's say he urinated at 8 a.m. According to this opinion, the timing of wiping over the khuff, the 24 hour for a resident or 72 hours for a traveler, begins at 8 a.m. when he broke his wudū. Their rationale is, when does the need or permissibility of wiping over the khuff arise? The need for wiping over the socks actually arises after breaking the first wudū while wearing the khuff. They said the earliest time one may need to use the exemption of wiping over the khuff starts and begins when he first invalidates his wudū after wearing them. They used the earliest point of when the need to use the exemption of wiping over the khuff arises. And that is when wudu first breaks after wearing the khuff. The second opinion is the opinion of Al-Hasan al-Basri. He said it starts from when you first put them on. This is a very weak opinion because if you wear the khuff or socks and you remain on wudu and you take it off, then you wear it again, you take it off, and you keep doing that, you're permitted to do that as many times as you want since you didn't wipe over them, nor did you invalidate your wudu. So that wouldn't be a proper timing to start the timing of the 24 or 72 hour limit. Has to either be the first opinion or the third opinion. The third opinion is the opinion of Imam Ahmad, the opinion of Ibn al-Mundhir, and the opinion chosen by An-Nawawi and Al-Awza'i. They said it starts from the first wiping on the khuff after one wears them. Not the breaking of wudu like the first opinion, but the first wudu you do after you wear the khuff and you wipe on them, that's when the timer begins for the 72 or 24-hour limit. Ibn Taymiyyah chose this opinion. In the scenario we took, the person made wudu at 6:30 a.m. He wore the khuff. This timing would be the timing of the second opinion, the one chosen by Al-Hasan al-Basri, which we said is weak. He negated the wudu by sleeping at 8 a.m. This is the first opinion. It starts right here. He made wudu at 1 p.m. to make a dhuhr and he wiped over the khuff. This is the third opinion. They said it starts right here. The first time he wipes over the khuff in wudu. The third opinion is the Rājih because this is an opinion attributed to Umar radiallahu anh, and that itself gives it weight because of the hadith عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين عضوا عليها بالنواجذ. Keep and adhere to my sunnah, the sunnah of the khulafa, the rightly guided khulafa after me. Number two, the messenger in some of the hadith stated sallallahu alayhi wasallam yamsahu. He may wipe over them 3 days and 3 nights for a traveler, and a day and a night for a resident. Yamsahu means he may wipe over them. That term is in the hadith. That's the key to when the timing starts. They said you're not considered one who does the masah or one who wiped over the khuff or socks based on the term of that hadith unless and until you actually start wiping over them. So the timing begins when the masah begins. When the masah takes place and starts for the first time. That's very strong. That's when the timing begins for one wearing the khuff or the socks and he wipes over them. The author said, مِنَ الْحَدَثِ إِلَى مِثْلِهِ. From the timing of breaking one's wudu to the next. We know now when the timing starts for the 24 or 72 hour limit. The next mas'ala is when does the timing end for wiping over the khuff? Fajr's at 6:30. You made wudu, you washed your feet, you put your socks on. 8 a.m. you fell asleep or you broke your wudu through any of the various ways. 1 p.m. it's a dhuhr time, and pay attention, it's Thursday. It's Thursday at 1 p.m. and you got up to pray dhuhr, you made wudu, you wiped over the socks or the khuff. We said that's the correct opinion for when the clock starts ticking. So for a resident at 1 p.m. the next day, which is Friday, does the wudu, this is our issue, does the wudu automatically break because the timing expired for wiping over the khuff? The correct opinion is that if it's 1 p.m. Friday, the next day, for a resident, and he's wearing the khuff or socks and he's still on wudu, the wudu continues on and does not get invalid. The wudu continues on. At 1 p.m. Thursday, this resident wiped over the khuff for the first time. We said that's when the timing begins. It's now Friday, 1 p.m. We said 24 hours. He's still on wudu. His wudu continues on. It's 2 p.m. Friday. He didn't break his wudu. His wudu continues on. His tahara continues on. It's 6 p.m. Friday. He's still on wudu. He didn't break his wudu by sleep or urinating or any of that. The wudu continues on. Once he breaks his wudu, then that's the timing where he can no longer wipe over the khuff, and he needs to renew his wudu by doing a complete wudu. Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Hazm, and Ibn al-Mundhir, and Nawawi, and the author of this book said, min al-hadathi ila mithli, meaning the tahara does not break when the timing is over. They said tahara ends when one breaks his wudu after the timing of the khuff expired, as the author mentioned, ila mithli. He can't wipe after 1 p.m. Friday for a resident and 1 p.m. Sunday for a traveler. But his tahara continues on until he voids it by sleep or urinating or any of the other negators of wudu. Why? Because in ibadah, we follow the proof precisely. And tahara for that person has been established by clear proof when he wiped over the khuff or socks. And it can only be invalidated by clear proof. We don't have any proof that the expiration of the timing of the khuff also voids the wudu of that individual. There's nothing that says if he's on wudu 1 p.m. Friday for a resident or 1 p.m. Sunday for a traveler, in the example that we took, that his wudu automatically expires as well. Forgive me for recapping or repeating or reiterating, but I want to make sure everyone understands these detailed fiqh Masā'il. Every reason that invalidates tahara has to be clear with proof. Like urinating, for example. The expiration of the timing of wiping over the khuff or socks is not one of them. So the person's tahara continues on. The origin is to leave matters at their original status. The origin is that one is on tahara and one should remain on that status until we have definite proof to show otherwise. So what's the purpose of the 72 hours or 24 hours for a resident? The Messenger ﷺ gave those limits to know when wiping over the khuff and socks ends and expires, not when the individual's tahara expires and ends. In our example, 6:30 a.m., he made wudu, washed the feet, put the khuff or socks on. He broke the wudu at 8 a.m. He made wudu and wiped over the khuff or socks at 1 p.m., Thursday. We said that's when the timing begins. 1 p.m. the next day, Friday, does the wudu just go invalid? No. Why? Because the expiration of the timing of wiping over the khuff just means you can't wipe over the khuff any longer. But it's 1 p.m. the next day, which is Friday, and you're on wudu. Your wudu continues until you invalidate it by one of the known negators of wudu. And the expiration of the timing of wiping over the khuff is not one of them. Your purification on Friday remains and goes on 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, until you void your wudu by any of the known negators of wudu, like breaking wind or discharge from the front or the back. Once you voided your wudu, you no longer can wipe over the khuff. Now what you have to do is do a full complete wudu and wash the foot. Another mas'ala under this. While someone's on wudu, does taking off the khuff at the expiration of the 24-hour or 72-hour limit after wiping over them void the wudu? Or even if taking them off within the 24-hour or 72-hour limit, Does the fact that he took the khuf or socks off invalidate the wudu? Does the fact that he's on wudu, but he takes off his socks or khuf, does that negate the wudu? The first opinion is the opinion of the Ahnaf and the opinion of the Shafi'iyya, and one of the two opinions by Imam Ahmad. They said he needs to wash his feet if he takes his khuf off, even if the gap from the last wudu was long ago. They said that's fine, meaning they gave no consideration to muwala in this matter. Imam Malik rahimahullah followed along with this opinion, but he deferred in saying that if he washes his feet immediately after the last wudu, then that's fine and that's proper. But if the gap is too long, it's not proper. Meaning, the gap between the person's last wudu and wiping over the khuf and then taking off the khuf must be short. He said that gap must be short where it doesn't violate muwala, which we took in previous classes. Otherwise, he needs to do a full wudu. In a nutshell, you take off the khuf or socks after wudu and wipe it over them. They said just wash your feet. Imam Malik said the gap must be short between the last wudu that one wiped over his feet and taking them off. The second opinion, they said tahara is invalid when he takes off his khuf or socks. And that's one of the opinions of the Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila and Nakha'i, and Zuhri and Makhul and Ishaq ibn Rahway and Al-Awza'i all chose this opinion. The third opinion is what Ibn Hazm and Ibn Taymiyyah chose. They said he has to do nothing and his purification continues on, because the wudu is affirmed and there is no proof wudu gets invalidated by removing the khuf or the socks. And this is the rajih and correct opinion. One who takes the khuf or socks off while on wudu, his wudu continues on and he has to do nothing. The wudu continues on so long as he doesn't break the wudu. The same rationale applies from the previous mas'ala on whether one's wudu ends after 24 or 72 hours lapse. The proof or rationale is that there's no proof from the Quran or Sunnah or Ijmā that taking the khuf or socks off breaks the wudu. It's not one of the things that invalidate the wudu. The person is on wudu by solid proof permitting him to wipe over the socks or khuf, and his wudu will not get invalidated except by solid proof. And there's no proof to show that taking off the socks or khuf negates the wudu. They also used qiyas. They said it's like someone who has hair. He wipes over his hair in wudu. He wipes over his head in wudu. Then goes to the barber and shaves his hair. You don't need to go and re-wipe the bald head now. So the bottom line is that the rationale for the last two Masā'il that we took are nearly the same. What is it? Taking off the Khuff and the expiration of the timing for the Khuff, both of those two issues don't invalidate the wudu, and the tahara continues on. The strongest of the rationale or proof is that there's no solid, clear proof that taking off the khuf or socks or the expiration of the time for wiping over the khuf or socks breaks wudu. There's no proof on that. The author then says, على ساتر ثابت بنفسه. Wiping is established upon a satir. ثابت بنفسه. They must be robust in themselves. We have two terms here. Restrictions on a khuf or socks. First of all, he said satir, meaning that it covers. Then he said thabitin, which means robust in itself. Let's start with satir. Satir is a very broad term. It means the khuf or socks must cover. And he could be referring to one of three things, or all three of them, or some of them. He could mean satir as that it completely covers the feet up to the ankles. He could mean satir in that it covers the foot with no holes in it. He could mean satir that it covers in that it's not a see-through, like women's nylons or socks that are see-through. Let's take, or khuff, if they do exist, which are see-through, where you can see the flesh through them. Let's take all three of these masā'il one by one. First one is satir, completely covers the foot up to the ankles. Does the khuff or socks have to be above the ankles? The first opinion, this is the opinion of all four of the madhahib. They all four of the madhahib require that the khuff must be above the ankles. Anything below the ankles, they say, is not permissible. They said it needs to cover the part of the foot that must be washed as a fard for wudū, which is the foot up to the ankles. They compared where in the khuff to the wudū. In wudū, what do you wash? You wash by fard the foot up to the ankles, as we took. So they said the khuff must cover the part that must be washed in wudū, all the way up to the ankles, of course including the ankles. Some of the linguistic scholars also define the khuff as to what covers the ankles. They also said if you allow wiping over the khuff or socks and they're below the ankles, where do you draw the limit? They also said if you allow wiping on low-cut socks or khuffs, the ankles are bare. And now you're making wudū, you need to wash the ankles because they're bare, they're showing. And as a rule, they said, you can't combine between wiping over the khuff and washing the ankles in such a scenario. You can't half wash a limb and half wipe it. So you can't have a khuff or socks below the ankles. The second opinion is opinion chosen by Ibn Hazm and Al-Awzā'i. They said it doesn't need to cover the area of the fard being washed. They said because the exemption came for wearing any khuff. And the proof doesn't state that it must cover the entire limb that is washed in wudū. There's no proof that states that. They also said if there was a limit on the khuff, the Messenger ﷺ would not neglect telling us. So what's considered a khuff in socks and is worn on the foot, that's proper for wiping. Ibn al-Mundhir and Ibn Hazm and Ibn Rushd under this added that if it doesn't cover the ankles, then you wipe over the khuff and you wash the ankles. In this narrow dispute, it may be better to go by al-khuruju min al-khilafi mustahab. Freeing yourself from such dispute is better and recommended. And that would be wiping over only what's above the ankles. In addition to the rationale, the fact that the four Imāms agree on this issue gives it some strength. Some even consider that an Ijmā, but the correct view is that the four Imāms agreeing on opinion is not considered an Ijmā, it's not consensus, because they're only the four Imāms. In fact, if the four Khulafa radiallahu anhum, if they were to agree on an issue, it may be hujjah, but it's not considered an Ijmā. And there's a hadith recommending following the rightly guided Khulafa that we mentioned earlier. So it's a narrow dispute, and what gives boost to the first opinion is that the four Imāms agree on it, and even though the second opinion has some strong rationales, but al-khuruju min al-khilaf awla is better for you. Freeing yourself from the dispute is better. So we took the first mas'ala on satir. There's two masā'il left, and the two masā'il left are if the satir, as in if the khuff has a hole, which we'll take inshallah next week, and then satir as in not being a see-through, like sheer socks or nylons. That's the two matters that we'll start off with next week inshallah, and then we'll go on to ثابت بنفسه. جزاكم الله خير. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.